From the director of Resident Evil comes a thrilling new post-apocalyptic epic in 2025 in the Lost Lands. Based on the short story by Game of Thrones creator George R.R. Martin, starring Milla Jovovich and Dave Bautista in a deadly fight for survival, the story unfolds in a future where a devastating war has reduced the world to ashes. All that's left is a shattered wasteland known only as the Lost Lands. Monstrous, evil creatures now roam freely, hunting anything that moves. One last human city stands a final sanctuary in a world gone mad. In the ruins walks Grey Alice, a powerful witch who can grant your deepest desires, for a price. Though the church has outlawed her, desperate souls still seek her help in secret. Grey Alice never turns anyone away, and that defiance puts her on a collision course with the church. Declared a demon by the Archbishop, she's sentenced to hang as a warning to all. But just after the captain left, Grey Alice turned toward a nearby enforcer. His men are already under her spell. Panicked, the captain slits his own man's throat and launches a full hunt for Grey Alice, but the witch strikes first. Hidden in the shadows of a warehouse, she silently takes them down one by one. The captain looks around in terror, unable to see her until it's too late. She catches him with ease, but she didn't kill him. Instead, she hoisted him up the same way, leaving him hanging in humiliation. This act was a blatant provocation to the church. The oppressed citizens, long suffering under the church's iron grip, began to feel a spark of rebellion ignite within them. Soon after, the queen herself appeared, accompanied by her loyal captain of the guard, George. Once everyone else was dismissed, the queen came straight to the point. She wanted Grey Alice to grant her the power to transform into a werewolf. Without hesitation, she handed over a hefty bag of payment. Grey Alice accepted the deal and promised to acquire a shapeshifter's power for the queen, taken straight from the Lost Lands. When the full moon rises, she said, the queen's wish would come true. But not long after the queen left, George returned to Grey Alice in secret, this time with a different offer. He presented her with a family heirloom, a pocket watch passed down through generations, offering it as payment. His request? Ensure that the queen's transformation never succeeds. Grey Alice immediately saw through George's true intentions, but said nothing, and silently took the watch. To track down a suitable shapeshifter, Grey Alice cast a dark spell to peer deep into the Lost Lands. Elsewhere, a group of hunters armed with silver weapons entered a horrifying zone littered with human remains. As they prepared to strike, a monstrous wolf shifter lunged out from a cave and slaughtered them all in an instant. Soon after, Grey Alice went to a bar and found Boyce, a hardened hunter who roamed the Lost Lands for years. She offered to hire him as her guide. When Boyce learned that she was hunting a wolf shifter to steal its power, he immediately thought of a man named Sartor, a beast known as the Great Wolf who lived by Skull River. Legend says no one who's gone there has ever returned. Boyce wasn't keen to get involved until he saw how much Grey Alice was offering. Just then, a squad of church enforcers stormed into the bar, quickly surrounding Grey Alice and Boyce. Thinking fast, Boyce hurled a two-headed viper that immediately tangled up a few of the attackers, but the arriving captain swung his blade once and sliced the serpent clean in half.
Find them.
Snakes killed my snake!
Grey Alice and Boyce seized the moment to flee the bar and made a break for the city outskirts. Meanwhile, the captain dragged an old blind man before the Archbishop. The man turned out to be Grey Alice's gatekeeper. Under pressure, the old man confessed that both the Queen and Gerais had secretly visited Grey Alice. Hearing of the Queen's betrayal, the Archbishop ordered the captain to capture Grey Alice alive no matter the cost. Elsewhere, Boyce brought Grey Alice to a friend's home at a trade outpost just outside the city. Hoping to rest before continuing their journey, he introduced Grey Alice to siblings Ross and Mara, explaining that they were heading to Skull River. It would take a full week to reach Sartor the Great Wolf. To steal his power, they had to reach him before the full moon rose. The only way to make it in time was to follow the railroad and pass through a tunnel that cut through the mountains. It was a dangerous path but a fast one. At dawn, they said goodbye and began their trek along the tracks. Soon, they began to spot monstrous bones scattered across the ground, proof they'd entered the terrifying Lost Lands. Unbeknownst to them, the captain was closing in fast with an army of enforcers aboard a train. That night, upon reaching the trade outpost, the captain captured Ross and strung him up, torturing him for Grey Alice's whereabouts. Loyal to the end, Ross refused to say a word. Unable to watch her brother suffer any longer, Mara finally broke down and confessed they had headed to Skull River, but the captain showed no mercy. He murdered Ross and torched the entire outpost before dragging Mara onto the train. The next day, Boyce and Grey Alice arrived at a crumbling city and headed to an old cable car station. Hoping to cross a massive canyon, Boyce called out for his friend but got no reply. When he entered the house, he found his friend hanging lifeless from the ceiling, murdered.
Seems Cyrus had visitors.
So do we.
When the two entered the main hall, they found the captain and a squad of enforcers already waiting for them. The captain coldly informed Boyce that his friend had been tortured to death for refusing to cooperate and that Ross had been murdered just as brutally. Then Boyce saw Ross's mother, barely clinging to life, tied to the front of the train, and fury erupted in his chest. Before he could react, the captain casually raised his gun and shot her dead on the spot. At that moment, dozens of hidden enforcers sprang from the shadows. Realizing they were outnumbered, Boyce and Grey Alice retreated fast. Scrambling aboard the cable car, Boyce fired a shot at the controls, triggering the lift into motion, but some enforcers leapt aboard in a desperate last push. A brutal fight broke out inside the cable car. They barely had a moment to breathe before enforcers on the roof opened fire in a hail of bullets. Grey Alice quickly climbed to the top, yanked one of them into the abyss, then drew her twin curved blades and clashed with the others. Growing impatient, the captain ignored the Archbishop's orders and fired several shots at the cable line. Snapping it, the cable car lurched, hanging dangerously over the cliff. Grey Alice began climbing the cliff wall while the cables strained under the weight. Boyce jumped just in time, grabbing the ledge before the car plunged. The captain, still determined, pulled out a sniper rifle but missed, only wounding Boyce in the shoulder. As he aimed again, Grey Alice cast a spell that disoriented him, blurring his vision. By the time he regained focus, the two were gone. They fled to a long-abandoned military base. Boyce quickly poured alcohol on his wound and, gritting his teeth, dug out the bullet by hand. Grey Alice stitched him up without hesitation. Then they rushed into a nearby warehouse, knocked over fuel barrels, and formed a fiery circle around themselves, bracing for what was coming. They knew the real nightmare would begin once the sun went down. Suddenly, all the lights in the area flared to life, illuminating the entire tower. Out of the shadows came a bone-chilling screech, and a skeletal creature, shriveled like a mummy, emerged. Boyce set the fuel on fire to hold the monster back. Outside, more undead horrors began clawing out of the earth, swarming toward the warehouse. Worse yet, they were intelligent. They coordinated, laying metal sheets across the flames to advance. Boyce kicked a fuel barrel into them and opened fire, triggering a massive explosion, but the blast hurled one of the monsters right into their circle. Grey Alice didn't hesitate. She hurled a curved blade into the fuel barrel, blowing the creature to pieces. At last, the Skeleton King atop the tower could wait no longer. He leapt down with his horde and slammed the two to the ground. Boyce was stunned to hear the Skeleton King speak Grey Alice's name. He knew her. But before the Skeleton King could strike, Grey Alice locked eyes with him and cast a spell, dragging him into a nightmare illusion. With Boyce's help, Grey Alice unleashed a torrent of flames from her palms, engulfing the Skeleton King. The firestorm swirled into a blazing vortex, consuming everything. Exhausted from the spell, Grey Alice collapsed into Boyce's arms, and the Skeleton King and his army were reduced to ashes. Meanwhile, the Queen, ecstatic after learning she was pregnant, confessed the shocking truth to the king of the mountain city. The child wasn't his. The father was Boyce, the hunter, hungry for power. She didn't wait for his reaction. She smothered him with a pillow, killing him in cold blood. Soon after, the Archbishop publicly announced the king's death. Since the Queen was carrying an heir, she was immediately crowned as the new ruler of the mountain city. The Archbishop swore loyalty on the surface, pledging his undying allegiance, but privately, he was panicking. He urged the captain to hurry. If they didn't capture Grey Alice soon, the Queen's power would grow too strong, and the church would lose everything. Elsewhere, Boyce and Grey Alice were about to cross the tunnel when the ground began to shake. Moments later, A train barreled toward them from behind. The captain spotted them instantly and radioed the Archbishop, who demanded they capture her now. Just as Grey Alice was nearly caught, the train burst out of the tunnel and was met with a broken bridge dead ahead. There was no time to stop. The entire train flew off the edge and exploded into a fiery wreck at the bottom of the canyon. Boyce, waiting below, rescued Grey Alice just in time, realizing their last move had failed. The Archbishop launched a coup to seize the throne by force, but it was too late. The Queen had already taken control, and all his guards had been quietly eliminated. Desperate, the Archbishop tried to fight back, but Gerais struck him down. With cold precision, Gerais declared him guilty of treason and stabbed him repeatedly until he breathed his last. Meanwhile, Boyce and Grey Alice finally arrived at Skull River just before the full moon, preparing for the battle ahead. Grey Alice strapped on a pair of specially forged silver claws. Boyce warned her many hunters had come here with silver weapons, but none ever returned. He told her she still had time to walk away, but Grey Alice remained resolute. She was determined to claim Sardar's power. As the full moon rose, she dropped the final facade and called up Boyce's lie. There was no Sardar. There never had been. Boyce himself was the shapeshifter, the Great Wolf. To restrain him, Grey Alice had secretly sewn a silver coin into his wound and laced his blood with silver. Under the full moon's power, Boyce transformed violent, monstrous, uncontrollable. He lunged at Grey Alice in a berserker rage. She used a quick spell to throw him into a hallucination, then slashed his chest with her silver claws. When he came to, he was chained to a massive stone, immobilized. Their journey had changed them. Feelings had quietly grown between them. As Grey Alice raised her blade, ready to strike, Boyce begged her to stop, confessing he wanted to be with her, no matter the cost. But just then, the moon broke through the clouds again. The transformation returned. Without hesitation, Grey Alice drove a silver dagger into his chest. By dawn, Grey Alice had buried Boyce, left behind the promised payment, and walked away from Skull River. She returned to the city not long after, and her presence alone sent a shockwave through the streets. Years of suppressed rage boiled over. The people, finally inspired, rose up to revolt against the church and the rule of the Mountain Queen. Grey Alice then made her way to the palace and handed the wolf pelt to Gerais. She told him to inform the Queen. Tonight was the last full moon. If the Queen dripped her blood onto the pelt and wore it before sunrise, she would gain the power to transform.
Well, Grey Alice, you have done what she asked of you, but I did not get what I asked for.
But you got what you wanted. There was a man, the father of her child. I have changed that.
Who was this man?
His name was Boyce.
But when the Queen learned the pelt had once belonged to Boyce, she broke down in anguish. Gerais stepped forward to comfort her, but the Queen, consumed by grief and rage, killed him without hesitation. Meanwhile, the rebels stormed the palace, weapons in hand. Hearing the chaos, the Queen was forced to flee. But something strange happened as the sun began to rise. The wolf pelt started to dissolve. Not long after, a resurrected Boyce appeared before Grey Alice, ready for revenge.
From Grey Alice.